Good morning, I'm Kathy Parkin for Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, unanimous, a significant and symbolic move on Capitol Hill. The January 6th committee voting to subpoena Donald Trump in what was likely the final hearing before the midterms. Now, the former president slamming the committee and the call for him to answer for his actions before and during the insurrection. Plus, we'll take a look at the new video evidence showing top members of Congress pleading for help as the riot unfolded. We have full coverage this morning. Tragedy in Raleigh. Breaking news overnight. At least 5 people killed by a gunman in North Carolina's capital city. We'll have the latest on how this tragedy unfolded, plus what we're learning about the victims and the suspect under arrest this morning. Heartbroken again this morning. Painful emotions after a Florida jury spares Parkland school shooter Nikolas Cruz from the death penalty and recommends life in prison instead. The verdict leaving families of the victims stunned and outraged.
I don't know how this jury came to the conclusions that they did today, but 17 families did not receive justice.
We'll break down the decision, plus reaction and what happens next. And give me a break. Netflix now offering a cheaper option to cost-wary customers. What you need to know about the streaming giant's new ad-supported service, plus what this could mean for the competition in the ongoing streaming wars. Happy Friday. We're happy to have you with us. The streaming thing, it's like every weekend I feel like I'm signing up for a new platform to watch the one movie that they have.
No, absolutely. Things are adding up, but hopefully you can save now with Netflix.
I know. With Bray, if you're willing to listen to an ad, you know what I mean?
That's true.
We'll bring you that later this hour. You do begin, though, with yesterday's dramatic hearing on the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
The House committee investigating the attack laid out the rest of its evidence in their argument that they say shows former President Trump was directly responsible for the violence and destruction that took place at the Capitol. The committee also voted unanimously to subpoena Trump to testify before them. And we have complete coverage this morning, and we start with a look at some of the key moments from that hearing.
Over the course of these hearings, the evidence has proven that there was a multi-part plan led by former President Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 election. When you look back at what has come out through this committee's work, the most striking fact is that all this evidence come almost entirely from Republicans.
Let's just hope we're celebrating. I really do suspect it'll still be up in the air. But when that happens, the key thing to do is to claim victory. Possession is 9/10 of the law. No, we won. You. Sorry, over. We won. Yeah. You're wrong. You. Let's get right to the violence. That's what I'm doing.
Because he's going to sit right there and say they stole it.
Agree.
I'm directing the Attorney General to shut down all ballot places in all 50 states. It's going to be no. He's not going out easy. If Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit.
On December 31st, agents circulated intelligence reports that President Trump's supporters have proposed a movement to occupy Capitol Hill. In particular, they flagged spikes in violent hashtags like "We Are the Storm," 1776 Rebel, and Occupy Capitals.
This was no longer a rally, that this was going to move to something else if he physically walked to the Capitol. I don't know if you want to use the word insurrection, coup, whatever. We all knew that this would move from a normal, democratic, public event into something else.
Unless we get more munitions, we're not going to be able to hold.
The door has been breached, and people are gaining access into the Capitol. We need an area for the House members. They're all walking over now through the tunnels.
This cannot be just we're waiting for so-and-so. We need them there now, whoever you got. Now, why don't you get the president to tell them to leave the Capitol, Mr. Attorney General, in your law enforcement responsibility?
They said somebody was shot. It was just horrendous, and all at the instigation of the President of the United States.
We are obligated to seek answers directly from the man who set this all in motion. And every American is entitled to those answers, so we can act now to protect our republic. So this afternoon, I am offering this resolution that the committee direct the chairman to issue a subpoena for relevant documents and testimony under oath from Donald John Trump.
If there's no further debate, the question is on agreeing to the resolution. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed is no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Trump responded on his Truth Social network, claiming without any evidence that the committee's investigation was a bust and that they have divided the country. Here to help us break this all down is Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Rafa and NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for being here on set with us, Danny. Ali, I'll get started with you. So the committee, we just saw a bunch of that evidence, this video, more video. We haven't seen some of this before of what was going on inside during this attack. Before that vote to subpoena Trump, what were the biggest takeaways?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. The committee knew that the bar of expectations was very high, having yesterday's hearing 2 months after their last hearing, and they still managed to surprise and shock us all with news of that subpoena on the former president. And they started by showing these clips of testimonies by former administration officials, showing that in public, Trump was still pushing these claims of election fraud, while privately he was admitting that he lost the election. They also wanted to show that he was planning to declare victory no matter what the results were. Meanwhile, in Congresswoman Liz Cheney's words, he had evidence more than anyone in the world, evidence of the truth. Take a listen to what she had to say.
What happens when the president disregards the court's rulings as illegitimate? When he disregards the rule of law? That, my fellow citizens, breaks our republic. The violence and lawlessness of January 6th was unjustifiable. But our nation cannot only punish the foot soldiers who stormed our Capitol. Those who planned to overturn our election and brought us to the point of violence must also be accountable.
Another revelation from this hearing was just how much the Secret Service knew and initially didn't share after, the committee subpoenaed the Secret Service for those documents, those communications. We know that they received more than 1 million pieces of evidence, of pieces of communication to have to go through. Some of that was shared yesterday. And I think the last highlight, you played a bit of the clip at the top there. Having been in that hearing room yesterday, I can tell you when the members played that never before seen footage of congressional leadership desperately trying to get the Capitol back under control, back to a level of security, to go back in and certify the results of the election. It was really a poignant moment in that hearing room. You could really hear a pin drop besides the audio playing from that video.
And Danny, I want to bring you into the conversation. So is Trump legally obligated to appear before the committee? And what happens if he doesn't? Because there's a good chance he won't.
Yes, he's legally obligated. He, like anybody else, has to respond to a subpoena. That's what it is. It's an order. Normally, it's an order from the court, but in this case, it is a congressional subpoena. There's some minor procedural differences, but the effect is the same. You get a subpoena to appear in person, you appear. You get a subpoena to produce documents, or duces tecum, then you produce those documents. But don't count on Trump showing up anytime soon. He will fight this. He will take this to court. And it may even go to the Supreme Court to develop a still unresolved question of whether or not a subpoena can be effective against a president or a former president. It's a very fact-specific question because it's come up many times before. Over the last 200 years, it's come up half a dozen times at least, but it's always very fact-specific, and it comes down to a balancing test. The specificity of the ex-president's objection versus the need for the documents or the testimony.
Ali, what's next here from the committee? I mean, no more public hearings are scheduled, but does that mean that we could still see another? And will we get this report eventually?
So this isn't the last of the committee's work. We know that this subpoena expires at the end of this Congress. So you can expect committee members to try and lock this in, check this off their to-do list before the end of the year, because they know that if Republicans win back the House of Representatives in these midterm elections, that the committee and the subpoena could very well dissolve. Actually, House Republicans have committed to dissolving the existence of this committee if and when they do win back power. But this may not be the last hearing, in essence, that we see from the committee. They've called this yesterday's hearing the last of a, quote, investigative nature, but they say we could see some more pop up when they finally release their findings and recommendations in this final report, they say to expect before the end of the year. Savannah.
And Danny, what were your biggest takeaways? And as far as criminal charges, is that possible as well for Trump?
Kathy, I am a one-trick pony. So while I've been watching these, I only think about potential criminal liability. It's my bias. So while yesterday's hearings were interesting, I found it compelling and disturbing to see video of members of Congress reacting in real time to being under siege. That was not as compelling towards the criminal case as some of the earlier testimony, which really dealt with Trump's alleged pressure campaign on the DOJ to supposedly just declare or seize voting machines or whatever the case may be. But any attempts to subvert the DOJ, to me, present the most real threat in terms of criminal responsibility. Everything else is, don't get me wrong, very disturbing, very troubling, but it does not pose the criminal threat to Donald Trump that attempting to subvert the DOJ would.
Danny Savalas, don't sell yourself short. Much more than one trick. Come on. Thank you. Ali Rafa, thank you. We appreciate both of you this morning.
Meanwhile, a major legal setback for former President Trump in the Mar-a-Lago investigation yesterday. The Supreme Court rejected Trump's request to intervene in the case. Trump's lawyers asked the Supreme Court to overturn an appeals court ruling and allow the special master appointed to review documents taken by the FBI during the August search of his Mar-a-Lago home. The FBI says about 11,000 documents, including 100 with classified markings, were found in the search. The former president sued the government after the search, seeking to prevent documents from being used as part of a criminal investigation.
And out of that breaking news overnight out of Raleigh, North Carolina, at least 5 people were killed in a shooting spree that unfolded over several hours last night.
And the first call came in just before 6 p.m. in a neighborhood northeast of the downtown area. Police say the suspect was arrested hours later. Officials spoke out against this latest mass shooting.
The nightmare of every community has come to Raleigh. This is a senseless, horrific, and infuriating act of violence that has been committed.
We have to end this mindless gun violence that is happening in our country. We have work to do, but there are too many victims. And so we have to wake up.
An off-duty officer was one of the people killed. 2 others were injured in the attack. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander has the latest from Raleigh.
Well, here in North Carolina, the governor has called this quite simply the nightmare of every community. And this morning, several of the victims were brought here to this hospital, along with the alleged shooter. Now, this morning, we're still waiting to learn some more details about the person that police say opened fire over some time, killing 5 people, wounding at least 2 others. They're only describing him this morning as a white male juvenile. Now, we are awaiting a press conference later this morning to learn more details, but police so far have not released any motive. They're not saying what motivated this individual to open fire. They're not saying whether these people have been targeted or whether these were just shootings at random. And meanwhile, we do know that we're hearing from witnesses this morning who say that they were locked down for hours, told by officials to stay in their homes as this somewhat manhunt unfolded for about 4 hours last night. They were searching different areas. They brought out dogs, helicopters, even diverted traffic to different areas as well. Again, we're waiting to hear from officials this morning to learn more about this spree that unfolded here in this residential neighborhood in Raleigh, North Carolina. Guys.
Such a terrifying night. Blaine, thank you.
And now to the sentencing trial for convicted Parkland school shooter Nikolas Cruz. A Fort Lauderdale jury reached a decision yesterday, shortly after starting only its 2nd day of deliberations. The recommendation, life in prison without the possibility of parole, is now sparking outrage among some of the victims' families. NBC News senior national correspondent Carrie Sanders joins us now from Fort Lauderdale with the latest. Carrie, good morning. You know, in addition to these victims' families that were calling for the death penalty and that you could see shaking their heads, crying, holding each other as the decision was being read. Every legal expert also that I talked to yesterday, both on and off the air, said they were pretty shocked by this decision, especially with how quickly it came. Tell us more about what you heard there after the jury's decision was announced. What did people there have to say about how they felt about it?
Well, first of all, it took a while for the family members to really digest what was being read in court. There were 17 murders, so 17 counts that had to be enunciated in the court. And in the process of reading those questions and answers, it took myself about 5 to fully understand that the jury was leaning towards life and not towards a death penalty. But for the family members who endured so much in this courtroom by listening to all the details over the testimony that lasted almost 4 months, it was excruciating because they all believed that the jury would have no choice if this case, if no other case, would be a death penalty case. This was their reaction following the announcement.
Shame, anger, devastation. This jury failed our families today.
I am so beyond disappointed and frustrated with this outcome.
I'm disgusted with the system.
Everyone knows, right? This is insane. We have a legal system, but is it just?
And so now we have a new twist this morning, discovering what may have happened inside the jury room, because after everything happened in the courtroom, one juror contacted the state attorney's office, and the state attorney's office late last night has made a filing that says in part that the day the verdict was rendered, a juror who shall be referred to as Juror X told the state attorney's office during deliberations she received what she perceived to be a threat from a fellow juror while in the jury room. So an investigation will now look into this perceived threat. But because this enunciation or this announcement of some feeling of threat came after it was entered into the court, after the announcement of a life sentence was given in the court, it's unlikely that it will change things. But it is the courtroom, it is the legal system. Anything is possible, but unlikely.
Absolutely.
Savannah?
Yeah, so Carrie, that's kind of this new little piece of information. I think that people are waking up, for some people, certainly the families that we just heard from, they're asking, how did the jury receive this decision? You mentioned that sort of confusion in digesting it, and there were, there's essentially all of these different charges, and then they were reading out the jury instructions with the answers to them. And I think it was that last one that said, the jury unanimously finds that the aggravating factors that were proven beyond a reasonable doubt outweighs the mitigating circumstances established, the answer to which was no. Walk us through what that means there. Was that the defense's mental illness argument coming in here to say, hey, that weighs in here and it doesn't mean that he should get death despite the aggravating factors, meaning, of course, those murders? What does that mean there? How did they come to this decision?
Exactly, Savannah. So you have 12-member jury. They needed to have a unanimous decision if it were going to be life. But while they're going through it in Florida and in many other states, you have the aggravating factors and the mitigating factors. Mitigating suggesting, well, there is a reason that these aggravating factors have happened and that it changes the balance of things. In this particular case, to simplify, what the defense attorneys had argued throughout all of this was that Nikolas Cruz, the gunman here, was born to a mother who was an alcoholic. He had fetal alcohol syndrome, and as a result, his mental capacity was diminished through life, and that mitigated to some jurors. And according to the jury foreman who spoke to the local station WFOR, 3 jurors ultimately voted for life in prison because those mitigating factors seem to balance out the aggravators here.
All right, Carrie Sanders, thank you so much. A heartbreaking story and a little bit of a confusing one this morning. Thanks for walking us through it.
Turning now to the war in Ukraine, the government there says its armed forces have retaken more than 600 settlements over the past month. That includes 75 in the occupied southern Kherson region. And yesterday, the Russian-installed head of that province urged civilians to evacuate amid Ukrainian attacks as their forces continue to advance. NBC News correspondent Cal Perry joins us now from Kyiv with more on that. Cal, good morning. Let's start right there in Kherson. What's the latest on Ukraine's advance in the south, and what's the guidance been from Russian-backed officials there? Are folks evacuating?
Well, I think they are. And if you take this as a two-front war, you have fighting in the east and you have fighting in the south. It's the south where you find this Kherson region and the city of Kherson. And this has been a focal point of fighting because this is where the current lines are. This is where the Russians have dug in, where they have entrenched fixed positions, and where Ukrainians are trying to break through. Caught in the middle, of course, you have the civilians who live in this city. Now, Russia is going to present this, and they are presenting this as an act of humanitarian behavior, that they are trying to evacuate evacuate civilians for their own good, for their own safety. The Ukrainian government is framing this as an abduction, that these are Ukrainian citizens that live in Ukraine that are now being forced to go to Russia. It gives you another indication of another place where you have civilians caught in the middle, and you have them being caught not just in the middle of a war, but in the middle of a propaganda war, and that seems to be what's playing out on the ground in Kherson.
And Cal, meanwhile, in the eastern region, one of those recaptured Ukrainian towns, Kupiansk, came under attack yesterday. What can you tell us about that? And what's also happening in the broader Kharkiv region?
And this is the other theme. So if you have fierce fighting in the south, in the east you have this bombardment, and the bombardment is happening with weapons that are not intended to be used for ground targets, that are not intended to be pinpoint weapons. These are, in large part, anti-aircraft weapons. And what happened outside of Kharkiv overnight is, once again, the Russians fired anti-aircraft missiles into residential buildings. At least 3 buildings were destroyed. There are a number of people wounded, we understand, in the area. We don't have a good accounting of the death count now because it's just happened. But again, it is this lashing out that Russia seems to be doing on residential areas because, at least officials here will tell you, they're losing ground on the battlefield, guys.
And Cal, we're also following reports of attacks in Russia itself. The governor of Belgrade has accused Ukraine of shelling a residential building there. There have also been reports of an explosion at an ammunition depot in that region. What can you tell us about these incidents?
Yeah, so a massive explosion on the Russian side of the border, as you said, at what we understand to be an arms depot. Now, Ukraine never takes responsibility for attacks in Russia. It's almost policy. What they do, however, do is they mock the Russian government on social media, and that's what we've seen in the wake of whatever this was, this mysterious explosion, as the Ukrainians will put it. And all of this is for their own operational security reasons. They do not want Russia to know what their capabilities are. And on the flip side, we see this here in Kyiv. When targets are hit in Kyiv, the government oftentimes doesn't talk about what was hit because they don't want the Russians to know whether or not their weapons are being effective. All of this, a long way of saying that this is not just a war happening on the ground. This is a war happening in television sets all across this country and in Russia, and that is reflected in that explosion.
That's a good way of putting it. Cal, thanks so much. Please stay safe.
And now let's get a check on your morning news now weather, as parts of the country are expected to see storms today.
Yeah, NBC News meteorologist Bill Caron joins us now with the forecast. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning. How is it already the middle of October? I'm just looking at the weekends come in and I know Halloween's 2 weeks away all of a sudden, and it's nuts. So we had this big rainstorm last night. Unfortunately, we're at peak leaf season. The leaves are absolutely gorgeous up through the Northeast. I know a lot of people were probably, it's a lot of big tourist industry. People driving to Vermont and New Hampshire, and this is the least thing they wanted was a big rainstorm and windy conditions. A lot of the leaves, unfortunately, have come down overnight. That's also led to some urban and small stream flooding problems. So the heavy rain continues. It's really from the Cape northwards up into New Hampshire and Maine. That's where the worst of it will be today. About 3 million people still under flood watches. Those little maroon areas there in the mountainous areas right near New Hampshire and Maine, that's where we do have 2 flash flood warnings. Additional rainfall, not a pretty day in beautiful Bar Harbor. Heading up to Bangor, anywhere in Maine for the most part, you have another chance of 1 to 3 inches of rain. So my apologies for your Friday. Those Friday night football games, hopefully a lot of that rain will be ending before those occur later on tonight. So your forecast today still feels like summer. Let's turn those air conditioners off. Still way too warm from Phoenix to San Antonio, Dallas. Even the Pacific Northwest has a chance of some record highs today. Very warm. The exception, Minnesota and the Dakotas into Wisconsin. That's where it feels like fall, and you may even see a few snowflakes up around areas like Duluth. So the weekend forecast goes like this. On Saturday, we dry it out in areas of Maine. That's good. Much of the country is dry. Maybe a pop-up shower in Miami in the afternoon. No big deal. And then chance of hit-and-miss showers around Arizona. Record warmth continues, though, in areas of the west. We should be up 88 to 83. Even Seattle could be near 80 degrees on Sunday, which is very unusual for this time of year. And then some wet weather will return. It's not going to be a perfect weekend in Oklahoma, Arkansas, or through much of North Texas, but you won't get rained out either on Sunday. It'll more be in the afternoon and evening that we'll see some of those showers and storms. And after that rainy day last night and then recovering today, beautiful weather from the mid-Atlantic to the Northeast. So all your outdoor plans, if you don't have those Halloween decorations up, do them this weekend.
Ooh, love that.
You still have time.
Yeah,
way to end the week.
Yeah, and we're still in fall, which is the season before winter, also known as Bill's complaints about shoveling snow season.
It gets rough. I'm already like, you know, it was a little frosty the other morning. I had to like scrape the windshield. I start getting angry already.
He doesn't like that.
And I'm going to be out there to watch. So.
Yeah. Bill, thank you so much.
All right. Well, coming up, controversy at the border. Thousands of migrants seeking asylum now being turned away.
When we come back, the new White House policy that some say is making a bad situation even worse. Stay with us.
Welcome back. The Biden administration has introduced a new visa program to help control the number of Venezuelans entering the U.S.
But critics say the move could make the situation at the border worse. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley takes a closer look at the new policy.
Thousands of Venezuelans seeking asylum from political and economic turmoil are now being turned away at the U.S. border, leaving them with nowhere to live but violent cities in northern Mexico. It's part of a Biden administration plan that will allow up to 24,000 Venezuelans the right to temporarily live and work in the U.S. if they can find an American sponsor. The rest will be denied the right to enter under a new deal just reached between the U.S. and Mexico. This year, nearly 8 million Venezuelans have left their country to migrate north, reaching the U.S. in record numbers. Venezuelans now the fastest growing nationality of new arrivals.
Who's from Venezuela?
¿Quiénes son venezolanos? Venezuela. I've been following them as they've crossed into Texas, sought shelter in overcrowded cities, and boarded buses funded by Republican governors to places like Chicago, D.C., New York, and Martha's Vineyard. Just after crossing the border into El Paso, Jesus told us he left Venezuela because he couldn't afford to buy food. What led you to leave Venezuela?
No trabaja y trabaja y trabaja y nada, no, ni para la comida, pues.
And the hunger and uncertainty don't go away when they leave Venezuela. New data just released from the United Nations says nearly 75% of Venezuelans who have fled this year do not have enough food, shelter, employment, or medical care. What's your goal here? Late last month, Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Chris Magnus told us Venezuela's refusal to take back its own citizens after they flee has made it harder for the U.S. to manage the rising numbers.
We can't do that with those populations because those governments don't allow that. So it does create some additional challenges.
Now, Mexico has agreed to take back Venezuelans the same way they do Central Americans trying to cross into the U.S. Krish Omara Vignaraja of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services worries the Biden administration's offer of assistance to a lucky 24,000 who qualify will come at the cost of many more who will be shut out completely from seeking asylum in the U.S.
Well, it feels like the Biden administration is cracking the window as they're closing the door.
And she says many Venezuelans will find it hard to find a U.S. sponsor.
What we don't want to see is that a very small, narrow pathway is allowed, that it requires a Venezuelan to be politically connected or to find a fiscal sponsor. And so only a select privileged few get to access that pathway.
Our thanks to Julia Ainsley for that report.
Turning now to international headlines, and tensions are escalating on the Korean Peninsula.
NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us now with that and more. Hey, Claudio, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, in a statement, South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said that fighter jets had to be scrambled after a number of military aircraft from North Korea flew very close to the border that divides the two countries. Now, the latest incident comes amid tension in the Korean Peninsula following a series of missile tests from North Korea. Now, let's go to Thailand, where the province of Ayutthaya has been submerged in flood water. Ayutthaya is a basin area that gets flooded almost every year, but residents say this was the worst flooding in more than 10 years. Roads are cut off, making help difficult. And is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a flying car that flew over Dubai, where that particular flying car made its first public flight. The two-seater is an unmanned electric vehicle. It's powered by 8 propellers and takes off and lands vertically. The Chinese manufacturer that built it says the 90-minute test flight in Dubai was an important base for the next generation of flying cars.
Time has come. It's arrived.
Sorry to be a hater, but it doesn't look much different than a helicopter to me.
That's true. Just a little smaller.
Yeah. I want them to just like, you could drive and then you're just like, woo, is that coming? We'll find out.
No comment. He's speechless.
Thank you. Coming up, an urgent reminder ahead of what's expected to be a severe flu season.
Why experts say you don't want to skip your flu shot this year. You're watching Morning News Now.
Welcome back. Health officials are warning of a severe flu season with higher cases than usual in this country and skyrocketing infections overseas.
Yeah, doctors are now pleading with the public to get their flu shots this year after many skipped them in 2021. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer spoke to the CDC about what lies ahead.
Just as hospitals nationwide brace for a wave of flu patients, some emergency rooms are already starting to see the early, rapid, and perhaps dangerous start to the flu season. The CDC director telling NBC News the numbers are higher than expected.
Flu activity is starting to increase across much of the country, with activity highest and increasing the most in the south and the south central parts of this country.
Though most flu cases go unreported, CDC data shows a steady rise in weekly cases, recently quadrupling, far more ominous than the previous 2 flu seasons when Americans were taking precautions.
Not everybody got flu vaccinated last year, and many people did not get the flu. So that makes us ripe to have potentially a severe flu season.
As the CDC launches its new vaccination campaign, with Dr. Walensky getting her inoculation today, a new poll suggests less than half of Americans plan to get a flu vaccine, and it comes as only 5% of those eligible have taken the latest COVID booster.
How worried are you that Americans are just facing vaccine fatigue?
I'm very worried. You know, our job is to meet Americans where they are and to provide them with the best guidance that we can to improve their health.
With a feared flu outbreak at a San Diego high school causing hundreds of absences,
they are both equally contagious.
Doctors are also worried flu and COVID cases colliding at the same time, a twindemic, could overwhelm hospitals. They are bracing for, but hoping to avoid, another dark winter.
When it comes to getting a flu shot, it's as easy as getting a COVID booster. They're at pharmacies across the country, and they're free. Back to you.
Miguel, thank you. And for more on this year's flu season, we are joined by NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Good morning, Dr. Patel. So let's talk about this. You know, what is worrying you the most about the flu season that we have ahead of us?
Yeah, I think you heard Dr. Walensky cover it, that we're not going to have enough people vaccinated, combined with the fact that the last 2 years have been the lowest record flu seasons, largely because people have been staying indoors. Children aren't allowed to come to school sick. That could combine to make a pretty hefty flu season. By the way, that's what we saw in the southern hemisphere. We look to the south, to Australia, for example. They had a pretty bad flu season, and they usually foreshadow what we have in the United States.
Dr. Patel, so good to see you. All right, I'm going to ask a question that we asked a lot last year, but I do think it's a good one because we all get confused about this. Is it the flu? Is it COVID? Do I have a cold? Can I go to work? Am I sneezing because I have allergies? What do you do if you're not sure?
Yeah, so honestly, there are so many overlapping symptoms, so it's really hard to tell the difference unless you do get one of those tests. Now, if you can't make it to a doctor's office or to a clinic that you can stop and get one of those rapid tests, you can still do those at-home tests. They're still easy to get. They can at least tell you, is this COVID or not? Not foolproof, but can give you that direction. The other differentiator that I tell patients is that you generally get flu symptoms pretty quickly after exposure. If you know somebody who has the flu, it's about a day or two after that you get symptoms. With COVID, it can take up to 5 to 7 days, even longer. So sometimes that can be a differentiator. Bottom line, get tested. You can't tell the difference.
And Dr. Patel, while we're on this topic about flu and COVID vaccines, I think a lot of people are wondering, is it okay, is it safe to get both the booster and the flu shot at the same time? Because I'm considering it.
Just knock it out, yeah.
It is. You can get them both at the same time. I've been doing them in different arms for patients because they can be pretty sore and it can leave one arm pretty sore than the other. So make sure that you at least differentiate your arms if you can. And then just a reminder, 6 months and above, anybody 6 months and above can get a flu shot. Right now, boosters are available for 5 and above. So we've got a lot of kids that we need to get vaccinated. Flu can hit the elderly and children the hardest. And remember, COVID can affect us all.
A lot of good info. So I'm going to have two sore arms.
Yeah, I know.
Today.
So then you just can't lift it. That is kind of funny if you, but I bet it does make sense because you get so sore. It's crazy. Yeah. Dr. Patel, great to see you. Coming up, a new plan to fight an old problem. Low-income housing set to be built in an exclusive California community. Why the plan is sparking controversy and how this could be a preview of a bigger fight here in America.
Plus, we'll take you inside a one-of-a-kind store where the price for everything is free. That's next on Morning News Now. And welcome back. For years, California's Redondo Beach community has been dragging its feet on meeting state low-income housing requirements. But now the owner of a former power plant in the city is close to proceeding with the housing development on that massive site, complete with low-income qualified units. NBC News' Jake Ward has that story.
Leo Postilnikov owns a very unusual piece of property in exclusive Redondo Beach, right on the water.
I want to keep the volume of the space, which, as you could see, is like 90 feet clear span.
It's a 49-acre power plant due for deactivation. It is huge. Postilnikov wants to turn it into 2,500 rental apartments, 500 of them affordable housing.
With 500,000 square feet of office, event space, a hotel, retail, shopping.
It's a whole neighborhood.
It's a whole neighborhood.
Thing is, he's been trying to get the green light for a while.
It's been in various stages for over 2 decades.
The city's mayor says the property is zoned for power or a park and that this development is dead on arrival. But he and the city have fought all this time. California is famous for the phrase, "not in my backyard," NIMBY for short.
The word NIMBY was invented in Redondo Beach, I believe.
Former Mayor Steve Aspel supported an earlier beachfront project also involving thousands of units, including affordable housing. And then these flyers went out.
You know, I don't want to throw my whole city under the bus. There's a majority of nice people.
Was there a racial component to it?
That's all. 100%.
In Redondo Beach, homes sell for an average of $1.3 million. The reason that converting this into housing is such a big deal is that California ranks 49th out of 50 states when it comes to housing units per capita. Now, the state is enforcing laws that require cities to make housing commitments or face penalties like losing the right to deny local building permits. So when Redondo Beach missed a deadline for filing its state-required housing plan, Postilnikov spotted a loophole.
That gave me an opportunity to submit under a builder's remedy.
Now, this city faces the very real prospect of all of this becoming housing and right in its yard.
In terms of parkland, we'd love to see at least half of it as parkland.
Councilmember Todd Lowenstein says his constituents oppose the development.
We are the second most populated city along the California coast.
Why shouldn't Redondo Beach and every city in California have to, by state law, build more housing?
Well, we're already full. Honestly, we have traffic issues. We have to keep up with our infrastructure like sewers and roads, police and fire.
He says that Redondo has now turned in its housing plan.
We've done a better job than pretty much any area around here.
And that state law, like this new development, just does not reflect macroeconomic reality.
If you're going to pick a place to have low to medium income housing, are you going to put it next to the ocean or are you going to put it inland?
Couldn't you argue that people who can afford that kind of housing should also be able to have a water view?
Well, everybody, I would have loved when I was 20 years old to have a water view, but as many people around here have worked their way up to being able to afford something like that. So, yes, everybody deserves a place to live. The question is, where do they deserve the place to live?
This city's reluctance to build new housing may ironically be the very thing that forces this project through. And with a lack of affordable housing across the nation, the fight over this project could be a preview of a fight in every town in the years to come.
Jake, thank you. And affordable housing experts say the fight in Redondo Beach mirrors debates happening across the country, and the outcome there may set a precedent for other cities.
Now, with the cost of living hitting record highs, a small town in Southwest Virginia is trying a new solution to give vital help to its hard-pressed community. Our own Joe Fryer has the story of a store with a difference.
In Dublin, Southwest Virginia, there's a store where you won't hear the ringing of a cash register.
We spent a couple of years kind of throwing out ideas. What can we do to help the community? And we kept coming up with a lot of different things, but something we kept coming back to was a free store.
That's right. Everything at the Pulaski County Free Store is free.
The only money that we get from this store is donations. We get no funding from
government, from churches, from anybody.
Hundreds of families line up on the first and third Sunday of each month to get the necessities they need. Everything inside is donated from the surrounding community. Well, similar to a thrift store, this store also stocks things like soap, toothpaste, and menstrual products, typically not found at most secondhand shops. The idea was years in the making.
We started in a storage unit in the town of Pulaski. We outgrew that fairly quickly.
My husband and I actually found this building for sale, and I said, this would be perfect. There's individual rooms. And I said, but where are we going to get money? Because it's a free store, we don't have any money. And so my husband actually took money out of his retirement, and he purchased the store outright for me.
With just under 3,000 residents, Dublin is a small town with a big heart, carrying on the tradition of Appalachia.
Mutual aid is Appalachia. It is part of being in Appalachia, is learning how to watch out for your neighbors and take care of each other, because, you know, maybe you're sick and you can't get to the store, I'll help you out. And then, you know, you're keeping an eye on my things when I have to go out of town. It's what you do when you live geographically isolated. And with the population of Pulaski County being so much lower, you see the need, I think, quicker than you would in a more populated county.
Southwest Virginia has a larger inequality gap than any other part of the state. And according to federal data, 1 out of every 7 Pulaski County residents lives below the federal poverty line.
Today I got some curtains because we needed new curtains because we don't have any hanging. We got sheets, clothes for the kids. Clothes for the kids are a big one. It really does help out for those who don't have the means to buy everything.
You know, people get here early to get in here, and just everything about the store is good. I like the customers, you know, I like the people here. I know there's a lot of people that are needy, that need help here, and this is a good opportunity for them. You know, they have the community fridge outside, so that's really good for needy families.
Giving residents extra support and a little more joy. The volunteers hope they inspire others to open free stores in their communities too.
I think my favorite thing is watching people grasp the concept. You just come in and take what you need and make sure that when you have extra, you bring it back, and to see people take that idea and run with it is a lot of fun.
Our thanks to Joe for that report. And the store owners also stressed that part of its purpose is to help with sustainability efforts, keeping items out of landfills and instead keeping them in the community. It's pretty cool. Now let's get you some financial headlines. And Amazon's latest Prime Day, that one we were talking a lot about, might have missed the mark.
Well, CNBC's Bertha Coombs joins us now with that and the rest of the day's financial headlines. Good morning, Bertha.
Hey, good morning, ladies. If you guys were talking a lot about it, you might have been in the minority. Amazon's latest Prime Day event appears to have fallen flat. At least that's what analysts are saying. They say the 48-hour Prime Early Access sale this week really didn't give Amazon the same sales boost or attract as much buzz as previous Prime Days. They're estimating that households spend about 40% less versus Prime Day back in July. And the average order waged around $47, down from $60 this summer. Amazon says Prime members bought more than 100 million items from non-Amazon brands, but they didn't offer any specific sales numbers. Meantime, TikTok may soon offer you a way to buy movie tickets. It's giving studios a tool called Showtimes on TikTok. They'll be able to show a trailer, display showtimes, and add a link to a site where people can buy tickets. TikTok says more than half of users learn about a new show, movie, or actor on their app, and a quarter who watch a trailer actually do buy a movie ticket already. And Starbucks and Delta Airlines are teaming up. They're going to let travelers link their rewards accounts. Delta SkyMiles members will earn 1 mile for every $1 they spend at Starbucks and get double stars on days they fly. Customers who link their accounts by the end of the year will get an additional 500 SkyMiles. Starbucks has already started offering mobile orders at select airports, including Washington, Dulles, and hubs in Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, and New York. And I can tell you, for one, I have used it, which is really nice after you have to walk 6 miles to your gate in that new terminal to be able to know that your coffee's waiting for you.
Yes, are you talking about?
So you get your steps in and your coffee.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it was so exciting when we were able to do that, because it's just like ready, because that's how you do it in the city. I always thought it was kind of weird you couldn't do it in an airport.
And now an added bonus, you get rewards.
I know.
Great.
2 of my favorite rewards programs.
Exactly.
All right, Bertha, thank you.
Thanks. Coming up, a cheaper version of Netflix, but of course there's a catch. It's got commercials.
More on the move, meant to win back customers. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. We all know Gen Z as a generation that decides what's in and what's out. Well, the next trend to become a thing of the past is, all right, drum roll, please. We've been talking a lot about this. The thumbs up emoji? Yeah, that's right. Thumbs are out. Just like skinny jeans, apparently. I still wear those. A Reddit thread sparked a heated debate among some users who say it makes them feel unsettled and even sparks hostile vibes. Others even claim it makes you seem old. But not everyone is on the same page, loyal to their thumbs. Others are calling it convenient, a quick and easy reply to messages, especially in the workplace. So, Savannah, let's weigh in on this.
Okay, I use the thumbs up emoji a lot, but I know it's also Gen Z that thinks like if you type with periods, it's also like you're mad at somebody. So I guess it's kind of like if somebody says something and you're like, great.
Yeah. Our EP was saying that his daughter, it's apparently like passive aggressive with the thumbs up.
Yeah. I don't know.
There are other emojis I think should be canceled, not the thumbs up.
They killed skinny jeans, they killed side parts. I don't know. I don't think
that's your generation.
Yeah. Not quite, but close. All right. Netflix has announced more details about its cheaper version, supported by ads that'll launch next month.
It comes after a difficult few months for the streaming giant, where it lost subscribers for the first time in more than a decade and laid off workers. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss is here now with more. Good morning, Steph.
Guys, thumbs up.
Yeah.
Thumbs up for Netflix. I guess I look old.
You use it? The thumbs
all
up?
the time. But I am old. Whatever. You know, Netflix was one of the final holdouts. The streaming service had resisted offering a cheaper version with ads at first, but the competition just got too intense. And the new version will be out in November. It's kind of a plea for new subscribers at the same time as being a scramble to keep the ones the company already has. No commercials is nice, but now Netflix is acknowledging that for some, cheaper is better.
I don't know how to say this other than just to say it.
The streaming giant unveiling its long-awaited Basic with Ad service. The new option will cost $6.99 a month, $3 less than its most basic commercial-free option, and will include an average of 4 to 5 minutes of ads per hour.
I've been sharpening my knives for all of you.
The commercial option, which is expected to drop next month, is the latest move from Netflix to try and rebound after a rough start to the year. In April, the company announced it lost 200,000 subscribers, and its stock price took a nosedive. Netflix cut hundreds of jobs and even tried to crack down on password sharing, a popular way for families and friends to watch content on one account.
I'm just trying to say I'm sorry.
But with everyone feeling the pinch of inflation, canceling a streaming service or two has been a quick way to cut back. Those bills can add up quickly. Without bundles, subscribing to these 6 services, including ad-free options, can cost nearly $70 a month, more than $800 a year.
You're paying so much more for the things that you need on a daily basis. And while subscription services are so important, they're also things where you don't really need them to survive on the day-to-day.
After another subscriber loss in the second quarter of 2022, Netflix says its new, more affordable ad-supported option gives them a price and plan for every fan. And with millions of consumers already juggling multiple subscriptions, streaming services are jockeying for position.
Streamers are going to have to be very, very focused on making sure that they're appealing to their consumers, making sure they're happy.
Netflix says that all the current plans and members will not be impacted by this new ad option, and that the new service will complement their existing ad-free basic, standard, and premium plans. There's something out there for everybody, and you should keep your eyes out for bundles of things, because that's a good way to save money.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so many out there. It just gets just as expensive as before you cut the cord.
Yeah, it begins to sound a lot like cable package.
Exactly.
It's
not paying just as much these days.
Yeah. All right, Stephanie, thank you so much.
You're welcome. See you. Well, we end this hour with an amazing story of bravery from one couple celebrating their honeymoon in Spain. And little do they know, by the end of that once-in-a-lifetime trip, they become heroes. NBC News correspondent Kristen Dahlgren has the details.
Doran Smith and David Squilanti had a lot of plans for their honeymoon in Spain.
Eating delicious food, relaxing.
Saving a building full of babies was not on the list.
I hadn't really pictured that happening, no.
But when they noticed a commotion while out sightseeing,
I said, oh my God, there's a fire. And immediately Dave dropped his backpack and ran across the street into the building.
I just ran in and saw just a bunch of babies kind of like sleeping and screaming.
The building was a nursery. David quickly wheeled out a crib full of babies, while Doran and others jumped in, saving some 20 babies and toddlers as the building filled with smoke. The couple then went back to sightseeing, where it finally sunk in.
And we were like, remember that time that we just ran into a fire and like saved a bunch of babies?
David does come from a family of firefighters.
It is nice to know that I never have to worry if we're in an emergency. He's going to step up and take care of the situation.
And we have a cool story to tell our kids.
About the time two honeymooners turned into heroes. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News.
A honeymoon to remember.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, that does it for us on this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stay with us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.